Oh, hello there! One of the most many ways we communicate today is with a writing system, which represents a visual form of speech. Everyone uses a writing system to communicate in day-to-day life, besides a few fringe tribal communities that live the same way their ancestors lived. And it may be shocking to hear that the area which we know as the Balkans are developed enough to also use a writing system to send very elaborate insults to their neighbors online. And although most of the Balkan, more specifically the former Yugoslav countries of Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia and Montenegro, can talk with one another with complete intelligibility, there is one thing that separates them apart, which is the scripts that they use, namely the Latin and Cyrillic script. So how did this situation come to be? How has this difference impacted the history of these two peoples and the region? And will the Cyrillic script die out soon? This and much more on today's episode. To be on the same page, let us delve into the history of these two scripts. Latin script is the most widely used script today, being an official script in 132 states and co-official in 14. I'm even using this script to write my script for this video. As the name suggests, the script has been made by the Latin-speaking peoples, better known as the Romans, but the script was just a step in the 3,000-year evolution of the Proto-Sinaitic alphabet, while the Cyrillic script has existed since around the late 9th to early 10th century, conceived in the First Bulgarian Empire under Simeon the Great. It's an official script in 7 and co-official in 6 countries, which will drop to 5 in 2025 after Kazakhstan changes to Latin. The alphabet is almost identical to the Greek alphabet, as it was modified to add a dozen letters to represent Slavic sounds which you can't find in Greek, so if you are able to read Cyrillic, chances are you can read most of Greek letters. So where does the word Cyril come from? It comes from Saint Cyril, who along with his Saint brother Methodius created the Cyrillic? Wrong! It was the Glagolitic script. Then who made the shh in a moment? But even though he didn't make the Cyrillic script, the Glagolitic script is just as important, as it's the oldest Slavic alphabet and a progenitor of Cyrillic, created during the reign of Byzantine Emperor Michael III to make proselytizing of the Western Slavs who migrated in Central Europe a much easier affair, since the Slavonic language was difficult to translate into Latin or Greek scripts. Thus the invention of a new script and transcribing the holy books into Glagolitic made many people abandon their pagan faiths in order to praise the Lord. The reason this came to be was a political one. Around the year 862, the Duke of Moravia, Rastislav, sought to oppose the influence of East Francia and its king, Louis the German. This was done with the proselytizing of Frankish priests in Latin, and to restrict that, Rastislav asked Michael III to send bishops and teachers to his land to proselytize in his native language. Enter Saint Cyril and Methodius, who along with their disciples traveled to Moravia to convert the Slavs to Christianity. Saint Cyril had much experience with translations, and along with the invention of a new script he also standardized the language, which became Old Church Slavonic, the oldest Slavic literary language. The Glagolitic script and the Old Church Slavonic was a great success, converting many Slavs into Christians, and the Glagolica was widely used in the Duchy and then later the Kingdom of Croatia, where many artifacts containing the Glagolitic script still exist today. But tensions began to arise. In 867, the brothers were invited to Rome by Pope Nicholas I to resolve the matter of who gets to evangelize the Western Slavs, as disputes arose with Archbishop Adalwin of Salzburg and Bishop Emanrich of Passau, who claimed ecclesiastical control of Great Moravia and wanted to spread the Latin faith in Latin. The Pope sided with the brothers and supported their missionary work in their native language. In 869, Saint Cyril died in Rome, and his brother continued the work in Moravia alongside his disciples. The next year, Rastislav was deposed by his nephew Svatopluk, who didn't support Methodius and was free to be tried by the German clergy, jailed, and brutally beaten for 2.5 years. Pope John VIII was horrified with the treatment of Methodius and ordered Methodius to be released, and for the German bishops who were perpetrators to be punished, with the Bishop Erlenrich of Passau suspended from his office. Methodius continued his work in Moravia and was allowed to preach in the native language. After his death in 885, the disciples that were in Moravia were expelled by the Frankish clergy and sought refuge in the Bulgarian Empire, where they were welcomed by the Knyaz Boris I to reside in his empire. In order to restrict the Byzantine influence, he opened 2 literary schools in Preslav and Ohrid, where the disciples were able to preserve the Glagolitic script and Old Church Slavonic, which is what Boris I wanted to avoid the said Greek influences. So who did invent the Cyrillic alphabet? It's tough to be exact for sure, but it's mostly thought that Saint Clement is credited with its creation, who was one of the disciples of Cyril and Methodius, and standardized the Glagolitic script, and over time developed and possibly named it the Cyrillic alphabet. Though we're not so sure even with that, as it could have been the disciples of Saint Clement who developed the Cyrillic alphabet over the years. But why didn't they just stick with the script they already had? The first reason was to simplify the Glagolitic script, which had become complicated to read at that point, and modifying it by adding Greek letters was much more convenient. The second reason was the banning of Glagolitic liturgy by Pope Stephen V in 885, who enforced the usage of Latin script, and so the duchies and kingdoms of the Western Balkans who adhered to the Catholic faith switched to Latin, while those in the Bulgarian Empire who adhered to the Orthodox faith began using the Cyrillic alphabet. 1054 was the year of the Great Schism between Constantinople and Rome over which Jesus was the real one. Here we can see geography playing a major role in the religious divide, as it made no sense for the Croatian duchy to adhere to the Patriarch in Constantinople rather than to the Pope in Rome, and vice versa for Serbia. Not to mention that the influence of the Eastern Church in Serbia was already strong before the schism, with its proximity near the Byzantines and the border it shared with Bulgaria, just as how the Western Church in Croatia had a strong influence, with Croatia being a sea away from Rome and bordering the powerful Frankish kingdom. Thus begins the long history of the usage of these three writing systems in the Balkans. The Middle Ages hasn't seen much development in the scripts. The Glagolitic script is becoming less used and only found in monasteries and liturgical books, while Cyrillic and Latin are strengthening their position along with their respective scripts among the educated class, and it's the Ottomans! And with their rapid conquest they bring in new religion and some weird squiggly lines. Pfft, said Croatia. What a weird god and script. I already have my god in Latinica. Yeah, said Serbia. What a weird god and script. I already have my god in Cyrillica. Hey, they look interesting, said Bosnia. I think I might try them a little bit. Croatia had better luck of not being forced to convert and write in a new script, as they were within the personal union with Hungary, a Catholic, Latin-writing peoples. Serbs were on the other, less fortunate side of the coin. While they were spared from being forcibly converted to Islam because of that sweet jizya tax, they were unable to resist the Ottoman encroachment on their land and ended up under their rule. Orthodoxy restricted, heavy taxation, and the abduction of non-Muslim children to become Muslim janissaries back in Constantinople? Yeah, safe to say that Serbs didn't like that, and for the next 400 years they resisted and rebelled many times, with uprisings being crushed again and again. The beginning of the 19th century saw a political change in the Balkan region, as well as in the linguistic region. The Serbian Revolution saw the establishment of an autonomous Principality of Serbia, and the slow disintegration of the Ottoman Empire, while the Cyrillic and the Latin alphabet became standardized in the forms that they are now. Enter Ljudevit Gai for Latin standardization and Vuk Karadžić for Cyrillic standardization. Vuk Stefanović Karadžić fled to Vienna in 1813 as the first Serbian uprising took place. There he met a Slovene named Jernej Kopitar, who was working as an imperial censor, and started working together, collecting many Serbian proverbs, stories, legends and hymns, and at the same time attempting to reform the early Cyrillic alphabet, and simultaneously the Serbian language itself, which had at that point in time become bloated with letters which were rarely used and not really useful to the average Serbian person. In 1818 he published the first edition of the Serbian dictionary, containing over 26,000 words, where he simplified the alphabet and the spelling. He followed the principle of the German philologist Johann Christoph Adelung of "write as you say and read as it's written," which explains why instead of writing Joe Biden's name like this, Serbs wrote it like this. He kept a dozen of the letters that were already good enough, added "y" from the Latin script, created new ones, and threw away a lot of unnecessary ones that were pretty archaic. How was this reform viewed by Serbs? Not that great, by those who could read at least. The Metropolitan Bishop of Karlovac, Stevan Stratimirović, was very critical of these changes, along with other Orthodox bishops and the founder of Matica Srpska, Jovan Hadžić, who saw these changes as a means of converting Serbs to Catholicism. What? You might say. That's a crazy claim. But you must understand where we are, so claims like these are on the low tier. But what made him think like that? Possibly the fact that Karadžić was married to a Catholic woman, and was married in a Catholic church, in an empire where Catholicism was an official religion. So he was probably viewed as an outsider, already secretly converted to the wrong version of Christianity. It wasn't until 1847 that Vuk's reforms won out against the conservative elite, with some help from Julian Danicic and the upcoming of new Serbian intellectuals who favored his reforms, as it slowly but surely began to be adopted in the Serbian Principality. One second edition dictionary later, and one mild case of death in 1864, his literary language became official in the Principality 4 years after his death. On the other corner we have Croatian Latin alphabet reform, finalized in its current form by Ljudevit Gai, who in the same time period as Vuk Karadžić published articles on the orthographic reform of the Latin alphabet. Yuri Guy took inspiration from the Czech alphabet and other Croats before him who supported a reform on the Latinica, and just like Karadzic also followed the principle of write as you say and read as it's written. He borrowed many Czech letters like this, which over time became ñ, č, and j, but also added z, s, z, ch, sh, and zh. In 1830, at the age of 21, he published his first orthographic book with explanations for an updated spelling of Croatian. Why so? It was during his lifetime that he was a member of the Illyrian movement in the South Slavic parts of the empire that pushed for a pan-South Slavic cultural and linguistic unification, and Guy was one of its prominent members who sought to awake the national consciousness of the Croats by publishing newspapers, a poem, and his new alphabet. The Illyrian movement had grown quite a lot throughout the present-day Croatia, and then in 1843 the use of the name Illyria was banned. "No problem," said Ludwig, "we'll just publish our stuff under a new name." And then in 1872 he died in his own printing shop. It's also important to note that all of this happened due to the increasing Germanization and Magyarization of Croatia, which awoke the aforementioned national consciousness of the Croatian kingdom. The 20th century hadn't seen much change in the alphabet, just the strengthening of the position of the new alphabets, which contain the same sounds and letters, thus making it interchangeable, so that a Serb can easily understand the Latin script the same way a Croat can easily understand Cyrillic. First World War later, and Kingdom of Yugoslavia makes both scripts official. Oh, never mind, Fascist Croatia banned Cyrillic. Oh, never mind again, Yugoslavia 2.0 made both scripts official, where children are required to learn both scripts in school. Oh gosh darn it, they don't need to do that anymore. So everyone went their own separate way in the 90s, but the minorities in those countries still prefer the alphabet their fatherland uses, especially in Croatia, where Cyrillic has come under fire in areas where there are notable Serb minorities, like in Vukovar, where there were major protests in 2013 for the use of both scripts, since the town has a great nationalistic importance as a town that defied the JNA during the Homeland War. Thus many Croats have forgotten how to read and write in Cyrillic, while in Serbia, the script has come under threat of going out. With the advent of the internet, many people don't have Cyrillic installed on their computers and phones already, and since they already learned Latin in school, it was a no-brainer to use it. While the older generation prefers Cyrillic more, the younger generation prefers Latin, as it's a de facto script on the internet. Even throughout Serbia, you can see many street signs displaying both the Latin and Cyrillic script, while the billboards show either Cyrillic or Latin. The 2006 Constitution states that Cyrillic is the official script and that all government documents must be written on it. Oddly enough, on the internet world, the domain of Serbian government website is in the Latin script, with a large percentage of websites using the RS domain instead of RS. Conservative figures in the politics of Serbia are pushing for laws to protect Cyrillic and promote the use of it, as the script is seen as a part of national identity. If you don't know Cyrillic, then you're not a Serb type of identity. There were some laws introduced to combat the dwindling use of Cyrillic, but so far, nothing has been made out of it. Does this mean that Cyrillic is on the way out? Not really. Cyrillic is, in my opinion, going to be used in Serbia for a pretty long time. It's not endangered in any way, though, in my opinion, its status should be questioned as the years go by and the younger generation who use the internet become older, or if the law truly does pass and only Cyrillic can be used in Serbia. But until then, nobody quips this time. Therefore, the class is dismissed. If you'd like to see more content, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future uploads. 1 like equals 1 cent for a plane ticket to Germany. And comment down below to express your undying love towards your country. Take care and see you around in a month.